Hey, Rabbi. How you doing?
Good evening. This is Neuropa.
It does feel right, doesn't it? It feels like music you would fight for. Fight to, fight for.
Music you would die for.
Yeah.
In the steel mill, of course, only.
No. There's some real greatest generation to this. I can imagine like building a plane or like taking care of a tank in the South Pacific. Or even just flying the plane. All right, well, welcome to Neuropa. This is a pretty great day. It was already a great day, but it'll be even better now that it's Fluorescent Metrokosmos. Yeah? What do you think?
Indeed. Indeed. Well, I just pulled together, two words from the titles we have for today to make a name
That
for
is
the
actually the
episode.
formula. I know he might have like clued you into the secret, but that's partially how this works. So here's a couple articles on health we're going to talk about. There's a lot of things going on in the world that we're going to look at there. His story, right, as opposed to her story, because we have to understand the bias of his story. We're going to go through a few of those articles. And then the Earth shape is always a section that seems fun to talk about that we bring up in the later part of the show. Better PR, we're going to talk about them and them and Obama, which was pretty great. I mean, come on, who didn't love seeing the Pepsi commercialism of the president reciting an 8 Mile theme song? East Turia will be cool, and then energy. We're going to get into 0 point energy because the singularity is near, and we're going to have to get ready for that, right? Isn't that kind of the. It's almost now.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, Dr. Hamer to the chief rabbi, Schneerson.
Yeah, so I'd be curious if you actually know who Rabbi Schneerson is. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have a lot more information about him on file than I do. Had you heard about him before?
Yeah, some people say he's the real Christ. Some people say he's like the antipasta to the Christ. He's a Lubavitch Reb who was when we talk about the New York Jews that don't believe in Christianity, but also have had their own rabbinical schisms, right? You've got like Sabbateanism and everything. Some people would say this is either an alternative or even a progenitor to further American Jewish religious movements, and also the idea of Chabad bringing back maybe God to earth as soon as possible. Not necessarily through the worst acts either. So a lot of people will say that like the Sabbateans are trying to upset the order to get God so upset that God returns. But that's not
Right.
really what Schneerson was about. Schneerson was far more about mitzvahs, doing the mitzvahs and getting to a point where everyone could live following this, if everyone could live in their lifestyle properly without anyone stopping them and they were helping each other out. Like there's actually a lot of interesting things that Schneerson said, but they were also working towards bringing eschatology. They were eschatologists, right? He was an eschatologist. So the idea that bringing the end of the world would be, it's like not really that sounds worse than it is though, right? Like the end of the world in a term of making bringing God back. Bringing God back is kind
The
of
end
the.
of which world is always the question, yeah. And bringing God back, of course, we had that. I'm sure you had that talk also with David about the 33rd degree and where is God exactly now? Is he inside the world? Is he outside the world? Can he be invited back into this world? It's kind of.
Yeah, there's another idea there too that there's like 613 places in the world that God is forbidden, right? That the devil has to be cast out of, and that they're going to those places. There's a lot to um the
Sounds
Chabad.
like a role-playing game.
I mean, maybe, but I think there's all there's it's pretty interesting that there's an argument in the Jewish beliefs between like what is God, like you just said, or is God something that's internalized, and maybe we need to look at God like in a different way. So the Deuteronomists who try to make God kind of an atheistic bureaucracy or a hierarchy or some sort of a constellation of God. that's also, I think, a reasonable way to look at things. But then you have people that will say, hey, this is a religion. Like the Schneersons are essentially closer to the Chaldean original belief, right? Like there's a we don't talk about God's wife, but God has a wife, right? Like
Oh yeah,
there's
I
a
heard
bit
that
more
story. Yeah.
there's a bit more of an anthropic personification there, which I don't know. I'd like to hear someone who is more interested in Chabadism, like Lubavitch Chabadism today, say if they believe that. But I think that's kind of the point, is that it's a bit more real, right? And not so um spirit, like humanist to a point of spiritualism where you say everything's a metaphor. Like they actually take it more seriously, and I respect that.
Right. Well
Right?
put.
If you're
So
just stepping in, we're talking about Chabad and the Ninja Turtles, right? That was the other thing. Everybody remembers, if the only thing you know about Chabad is that the Lubavitch were making tunnels in New York City recently, right? That was a big newspaper article. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, they've got tunnel." But you have any idea how hard it is to get a permit in New York City? Like, it doesn't really impress me that they were trying to get around permits. You know, good for them. Sounds libertarian.
oh yeah. So why I brought this up, if you want to bring up the article,
Fair, fair.
this is something quite interesting, and I mean, the topic cannot be too banned anymore because by now you can actually enter on YouTube Germanic or Germanic New Medicine, and you
Mm-hmm.
will actually find quite a few very decent summaries also by English doctors who
Dude,
are
the Ober
explaining the
Rabbi. That is such a wild thing to read. Ober Rabbi. I mean, it's right, but it's just
yes,
the
yes.
Obergruben Rabbi. Okay.
So you will an
Sorry.
American said that you will uh, so you will find great summaries, which I can really recommend. The original German documentary I saw is called Die fünf biologischen Naturgesetze, or in English, The Five Biological Laws. That's another term you can search for. Even on YouTube, you will find very decent summaries of basically a system or a perspective on human health. Whereas the basic idea is that what we would call illness is seen as a self regulation and detoxification mechanism of the body. And also, one thing that Dr. Hammer pioneered was the idea of taking scans of the brain without a certain contrast solution, which is usually used. And then you can see the brain in a particular way, and you can see basically which areas of the brain are, you could say, inflamed in a sense or slightly enlarged. And this then actually, big surprise, holographically corresponds to the organs in the body. And if you are able to properly read this, you can kind of read off all kinds of potential issues or current stressors acting on different parts of the body holographically by looking at these brain scans. And why this is so important is that it includes the idea of, let's say, psychosomatics in a different sense. So different type of conflicts, they are, for example, called I'm just paraphrasing now, but home conflict, so conflict regarding your own, let's say, secure space, border conflict, and all types of other things, which can then actually explain different types of issues. One example being, which is brought up in the literature at least, with the Indians that then, or Native Americans, and there was some particular instance where they all got some kind of sickness. It was like a mass outbreak. And the German New Medicine explanation for this would be that those individuals, it was a Native American tribe, they basically got all their land taken away. And this would naturally cause extreme emotional, psychological turmoil. And that this may actually have been the real reason why then there was a specific outbreak of a certain disease that again would match. I think in this case, it's this type of border conflict or something like that. Um, and here the main point being that in the article that you're putting up here, that Dr. Hamer, I think even he may have been in talk shows in the 90s in Germany. I'm not exactly sure. The only thing I had heard back then before researching myself was, oh, this is some kind of an evil guy, because supposedly some individuals that were not treated by the regular medical system anymore, he treated them or he assisted them as a doctor. And from the little bit I could research is that, yes, there are, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases potentially where individuals then died. However, again, consider that the regular school system, the regular medical system already had discharged them in a sense, in terms of there's nothing we can do anymore. But at the same time, there seem to be very many cases where this actually worked very effectively. And this particular letter was written by Dr. Hammer late in his life. I think it's dated like 2000s or something, the one we had just had up. And basically what he's telling the rabbi there, the Schneerson rabbi, whom apparently he had met, is he's basically telling him, well, I mean, I'm paraphrasing now, and anyone please, read the full document and so on. But basically, from what I understand, ever since Dr. Hammer came up with these ideas, it was basically accepted by, how should I say, Jewish authorities or certain Israeli authorities. And from what I understand, maybe we can have some statistics for this, but that, for example, the issue with cancer in Israel is a lot less than in other states, which of course is quite interesting, let's say. And from what I understand, this at least partially relates back to the idea that the information that Dr. Hammer attempted to bring forth, while outright banned, let's say, or defamed in Germany, was actually used to a certain extent in Jewish smokers.
Lower lung cancer rates. Well, that's good to know, right? Good for you, right? And then preventable
So
cancer.
maybe put back the article or the letter again, because then we can briefly look through it, and I can.
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, but this is already in English even. It is in English.
No, this is in German, isn't it?
The version I have is English. No, if you just click, it's in English.
Oh
There is
yeah,
one in German.
we have the translated
Right,
version. Right.
right.
We
So
do have
just
it.
so I'm not saying anything wrong, maybe scroll down a little bit, or I have it here in front of me as well. So basically he says that the rabbi has read his book, Cancer Disease of the Soul, Short Circuit of the Brain, the Computer of Our Organism, and he claims that the rabbi obviously understood it and that he used it himself, so what I had mentioned. And then he's saying, well, I'll just read verbatim.
Go on. Yeah.
I am extremely disappointed. This is again Dr. Hammer to Rabbi Schneerson. I'm extremely disappointed that you still have apparently not given orders to your Masonic lodges to lift the ban against the iron rule of cancer concerning non-Jews. And then he says, just please do not tell me it was not you, because I know about it. Anyhow, and then he's claiming that basically this group or affiliated groups are using his information, but at the same time outright shadow banning or defaming it for everyone else. And I had somehow heard at some point this letter existed. I recently found it again, and I found it's a very interesting entry point. But again, if you want to know the basic of what the actual theory is and ideas that he put forth, you can just enter German New Medicine or 5 Biological Laws on YouTube. You will find a few English doctors that do quite decent summaries, only about an hour long. Highly recommended because it gives you a very different idea of, let's say, the regular flus that people are having. Even I'm using the term now, which in this idea simply are regular seasonal detoxes, or even different symptoms which may at first glance seem quite disturbing or whatever, or where you're like, oh my God, am I gonna die now? But within this context, it can actually show there is simply a process of, let's say, inflammation, and then again, not deflammation, but let's say shrinking of certain areas of the body, certain substances, certain membranes in the body, and this can create all kinds of effects. And if you're aware for yourself when you put your body under stress and when you put your body in relaxation state, then you will also notice that oftentimes the quote unquote disease actually starts upon the fulfillment of relaxation. That's why, for example, teachers or children or whatever, children hopefully less at least, but teachers oftentimes may get sick when the holidays are starting. Because if before they've been under constant stress, their body is kind of in a fight state, has to stay active, has to remain performing. And then when relaxation sets in psychologically, consciously, then the body starts to repair itself. And that's then what would be called the illness, which actually is just a self-regulation, self-repair mechanism within this concept.
So being anxious is probably like part of the metabolism to destroy the disease, actually.
Oh
Just
well,
I feel sick all the time.
that's another that would be a different part. But here it would be more if I am very anxious for a long period of time, and maybe I'll be fine during that time or not be sick. And then when I start to relax again, then I may start getting sick because of all the built up stress hormones and all of
Mm,
that, which and the body didn't give itself also psychologically the time to relax because as long as you're in the fight or performance state, there is no time to repair or anything like that. So the body does not let you get quote unquote ill or simply does not
right.
start the detox self-regulation program because you still need to perform. And apparently you tricked your body into believing this is a, live or die
Constant
situation,
shock.
even if it's just going to the office or whatever. But again, that can then explain why later on, after constant stress, when the relaxation sets in, that's when the actual quote unquote illness may come. And this is especially important also in relation to the lockdowns that were in certain countries and so on. That also here you had certain buildups of stressors that then may be released at certain times. Yeah. Anyhow, anyone who really wants to understand health, I think it's quite a relevant piece of the puzzle, let's say.
Based. Okay, so everybody can check out Dr. Hamer letter. It's interesting also from his perspective on Masonic esotericism and Zionist exoticism, like exotericism. So here's the Donald Trump Basuch. What's this all about? Him reading with the rabbis.
Here, I just wanted to put it out that basically Trump is also visiting his grave, and Trump is also one of the guys who,
Yeah,
I guess, was at the Wailing Wall, where they performed the most interesting dance, let's say.
yeah. I mean, he's in New York, and so of course he's gonna have Jewish friends, but more specifically, in New York, you're closer to the Chabadists, so yeah, he's gonna have Chabadist friends, which is pretty cool because they're often at odds with Zionists. A lot of the time, they're all about America, freedom to
Really?
practice their own religion. Yeah, a lot of Jews are not Zionists. I don't know if people are confused about this, but yeah, a lot of American Jews are actually
Well,
anti-Israel and have always
I'm sure
been.
many are confused about it, but the real issue, of course, is like, I guess, with any religion, if you don't really know this, let's say, sects in detail and ideally know people from within it, it's very difficult, of course, to understand what their political views actually are. And then very quickly, just like with Islam or Christianity for that matter, things get lumped together in a not very uh,
Yeah,
exact fashion, let's
you
say.
can I'm trying to give an example of it, but like essentially what'll happen is Orthodox Jews are almost invariably against Zionism. And, sometimes Orthodox Jews will be like somewhat accepting of Zionism just because of, certain political conditions. But that's actually the minority of Orthodox Jews. And Orthodox Jews will refuse invariably to serve in the conscripted Israeli military. So it's interesting that Zionism is almost always separate and apart from Orthodox Judaism or any of the weird radical kinds of Jewish religion like Chabadism, because in general the Zionists are atheist Jews, right? They're atheist Jews or they're part of Baha'i.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah, they're
Oh,
Baha'i
and
religion.
Baha'i. And
Yeah.
just anyone who wants to know about Baha'i, check out, I believe it's even the video called Code 19 with David Ewing Jr. on my channel. And he's
Oh, just to
going
talk
into
about Baha'i.
Baha'i and this Baha'u'llah and so on. And
Interesting.
basically, it very much looks like this is a recently set up uh, New World Order
Very
sect,
interesting
basically,
religion.
to
I
further
was
dilute down the, common
I got interested in it through
heritage.
William Randolph Hearst, because William Randolph Hearst and Hearst Castle, right? His mother raised him essentially Baha'i, and in some ways, I think of William Randolph Hearst as the secret Krishnamurti of the Baha'i Theosophic school, right? Because he got to go to Persia, got to go to Canaan and Israel before it was Israel, right? And so most of the most interesting parts of history that were during depressions were stolen in wartime. He was able to purchase up with money from his father's silver mining trips and also his own paper milling and controlling the fortunes of the United States propaganda machines, right? So Phoebe Hearst, fascinating connection to the Baha'i, and also that we've said this before. The Theosophics have the Great Initiation League, but the Baha'i are like the Jedi who get to interact with different religions. So if you have two African tribes, where you have the Croatians and the Serbians, then there's a genocide. They're gonna bring in the Baha'i, right? Like you have Catholics and Orthodox. or you have different kinds of religions, they make the Baha'i the mediators, which is just so weird. It's uncanny. I don't know. So yeah, this is her
I mean,
actual. Oh, sorry. Guardians of the City is a really cool
oh
book.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, even yeah, oh yeah, these are interesting, but even I mean, I always have to think back, even when I'm thinking of what's his what's his face
Oh
now, the Prime Minister Netanyahu,
yeah.
and then always you think back already 20, 30 years ago, he was basically, I think, I don't want to say this, mix up things now, but basically you already see him running around 30 years ago with, crazy positions or whatever, and eventually succeeding and dominating the political landscape, dare I say, for many, many years. And the very same story you have with Viktor Orban of Hungary, who synchronistically enough already in 1989 was one of the 5 students or whatever chosen to give a huge speech during the more or less fall of communism, let's say. And, big
Look at this.
surprise,
This is
15 years later,
yeah.
he's ruling for 20 years.
Here's Netanyahu in high school in West Philadelphia, like Will Smith in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And they start the article off by saying he was not into sock hops or the summer of love. He cut his hair short and got angry if the soccer team didn't perform up to its abilities. This is all about him. And this is actually interesting because Bibi, or Netanyahu, went to the same high school as Adam Krigler, who I do Base AF with. That's our Monday show, right? So I find it interesting he went to the same high school um, as Adam Krigler did, the Prime Minister of Israel. Right there, that's crazy.
Well, if we want to, play that pseudo importance game, I'm pretty sure I went to the same high school as Erwin Schrödinger and like a whole host of people that, you know,
Yeah,
built
fair enough.
everything around
I
Austria.
it's
So.
it just seems like that makes more sense though. I respect that completely. My thought though was that the Israeli prime minister didn't go to the nicest high school in Austria. He went to like Will Smith's movie sitcom high school, which is like weirder than anything. West Philadelphia, born and raised, is for the prime. I mean, I don't know. There's something to that in terms of the Palestine war. I haven't quite figured out the joke yet, but it's weird. There's something to it. I don't know. But if anyone else can understand this, fit it together for me. Okay? That's all I'm saying. What about
So I
wait,
think the reason why I had put up that video with
yeah,
Trump and
right.
this, I'll bring this channel up again a little bit later. And here just wanted to show that apparently they are also related. And at the very least,
Wait,
if Trump
Schneerson's
thought,
related to Trump? What do you mean?
no, no, no. But I'm saying it's interesting that Trump is visiting his grave. I'm not sure if they knew about each other. We will later
Oh,
get into other individuals he
they
knew.
probably did.
Um, and then just interesting that Dr. Hammer, who, if I understand correctly, would have a very vital piece of health information to share with everyone, also was in contact with this rabbi, and the rabbi understood what he was saying. And then all I'm asking is, why does the American Cancer Association still consume billions per year, but strangely they have not even probably certainly published a single article on new medicine or whatever. Of course, I understand why,
Okay,
because
so they
it's not a good
definitely
cash
met.
cow, but
They definitely met in '86. It says. So let's see if I can find the picture. Um, I don't see the picture yet, but theoretically he would have met in '86 according to some records. So I don't know. I mean, it just seems like most likely impossible that someone at that level of importance in New York City, particularly running apartment buildings in Williamsburg, could possibly not know, the could not know the Chabadists and probably would have interacted with Schneerson. But yeah, it sounds like they actually met in '86. I would like to find the picture though. If anyone has one, that would be cool. I'm sure you respected him. Schneerson's like cool. Like that's the thing. He gets a bad rap. I think he's a cool guy. I'd like to hear someone argue with me on that, but I like
I
plus
haven't heard like
minus.
speeches from him. There's a lot, people saying things about other people. That's always,
He
has to
seems
be
to
verified.
be also like in terms of protecting the goyim, like he thinks that they deserve better than other
Oh,
people
really?
seem to.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. Like isn't that kind of argument of that letter you were looking at too, the Hamer letter saying like this is information that should be like public, like it
Well,
could
yes, but
save
but
the
but the
people
thing
from getting
is,
killed. Yeah.
right? I mean, this is what Hammer implores Schneerson to do, and also claims Schneerson has failed to do, to actually properly disclose and allow the so-called goyim to access this information properly. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, let's check out this Pepsi nanoparticle thing. What's going on with
yeah,
that?
you sent this to me. I'm not sure how you came about it, but that's where the fluorescent part of the title for today came from. I mean, yeah, anyway, it's just good to know. I don't even know if we need to discuss lots of it, except maybe what fun experiments one could do once these type of beverages definitely get relegated to be for experimental lab purposes only, and maybe cleaning your
Yeah.
bike
Right.
or something. But
Yeah. Spermicidal potency of Coca-Cola and Pepsi Cola. Amazing.
well, here we are.
Decreases sperm mortality to less than 70% of control within 1 hour. Wow.
Not mortality, motility. So
Oh,
that's
motility.
mobility, I
Okay.
guess, in
Okay.
a very
Still
strange
though.
sense.
Still though.
Mhm.
Not being able to, yeah, do effectively. Wow.
Not being able to move.
I'll
Hmm.
show them. All right. Well, nanoparticles are fun.
Nice.
Have you seen the conspiracy about glitter? Right.
What?
There was like
Glitter
a
is RFID chips or what?
there's like a glitter conspiracy theory. Who's taking all the glitter? This was like this happened a couple years before the nanoparticle thing, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, there's microplastics in everyone's testicles." But before that, it was like, "Hey, I was looking into glitter to do an article. I tried calling around, figured out there's like 7 companies in the world that make glitter or less, and that they can't tell you who makes the glitter and why they make the glitter and who buys the glitter. Who's the biggest glitter user? Well, we can't tell you because it's a complete secret. When a reporter asked GlitterX who was the biggest marketer, their lips were completely sealed, and the representative was not allowed to say a word because they don't want anyone to know that it's glitter in their product. Of course, this response has lit the imagination of many people as the foundation of the glitter conspiracy theory, or Glittergate. Most recently, many videos have found their way onto TikTok. What are the main theories? Well, I mean, like concrete, boat industry, boat building, I think, in general, just anything, putting glitter into concrete or into food. That's like the one that I think people are even most scared about, obviously. But yeah,
And what is glitter technically?
glitter's just tiny little pieces of, it's microparticles of plastic.
Yeah, but of plastic. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, well, it
All
could be
right.
whatever, but it's a reflective foil, right?
Right. I
And
mean, I know what it looks like, but I don't necessarily know what it's made of.
no, that's the beautiful thing. It can be made out of, as long as it serves a purpose, right? It's just glitter. See? It's brilliant. What did I make? I made glitter. Oh, what's the toxicology of your glitter? Right, that's the conspiracy. Okay. Glad we're through that. Thought transmission unit sends modulated electromagnetic wave beams to human receiver to influence thoughts and actions without electronic receiver. What a crazy patent, right? Like, where did you find this cockamamie thing?
Well, I found it in my inbox after you sent it to
Would you stop that? Would you
me.
stop that? All right, but the point is it's German, so you can't blame me for everything. I just thought it was interesting.
Oh, yeah, really? I mean, of course, the interesting aspect here is someone even just devising something like that that would not need any electronics. So it's cool. I didn't look at it yet, but I thought even just having
Yeah.
the idea to do that and be able to receive a patent for it, I mean, it's interesting
Oh, it's a decent,
enough.
especially in Germany, right? You guys are not into hokey stuff, so the fact that they were able to explain this detailed document. Unfortunately, it sounds like they were kind of held up against bigger companies that had already done this, and I think they lost the patent by
Yeah,
2020. Was it like, isn't it
and it shows it in the list, status
withdrawn in
withdrawn. Yeah.
2004 or something like that? Yeah, I think 2004 or 2005, so maybe even later. It doesn't actually say what year it was withdrawn. But I mean, this seems to be kind of the way of things, right? Is that if you're a company that has done some really good work, at a certain point you're going to get to a point where they explain to you, we already have this stuff, like shut up.
Yes, or as I mentioned, the example with that power company, just give us your tech. We want to combine it with this other company we have from India or
Yeah,
whatever,
I mean, basically, like if you want to be, they might bring you in. If there's a use, they might fold you in, but they might not fold you in. That's the thing. You might be useful enough that you're folded in. I think that that's often easier than getting rid of you at this point
Oh, sure.
because we're so
Oh,
close to
sure.
the singularity.
Of course.
But yeah, this
Especially
is
because of that.
yeah, I think, but it would be interesting maybe at some point. We should do a deep dive into Martin, right? 'Cause I think we're talking about like, we talk about Lockheed and rockets enough, but Martin's a really interesting side of this because in the 40s and 50s, the American zero G anti gravity tech was getting really good. And they were saying things like, we're going to be able to go to the moon and back 6 times a day. And that's going to be probably by 1958. They were saying this in 1951. And by 1953, 56, they shut up. They shut up. You never hear anything about Martin's zero G anti gravity stuff ever again. They basically, and so some people could pretend that that means that they just weren't very effective. But I mean, really, Occam's razor, when you start to look at all of the anomalous events around the world, is that they were just told to keep quiet about this technology that was ahead of the curve. And so we have basically 1956 is when all of this stuff goes deep pocket, deep state, whatever you call it, parastate, where all of a sudden it's corporate secrets that are, and even this is an interesting time. I think we brought this up last time because of the anti-monopoly case of Bell, right? Because when no, not that one, but Bell Labs.
Not that one.
But Bell Labs originally annoying. Bell Labs invented everything cool, or well, I mean, invented is a strong word. Founded everything cool, because at a certain point, the Germans, when we got over there and took your stuff, we're
Isn't
like,
it
whoa,
curious
you guys
why
have
they,
LEDs.
because of all the conspiracies or questions surrounding church bells or whatever, electroacoustics and so all of that, they just had to call that lab Bell Laboratories. Isn't that
Yeah, I
interesting?
mean, there's just obviously the Glocken is a big one, and the Kecksburg Bell is the other really interesting one, right? The Kecksburg Bell in Pennsylvania, and Keck like Pepe or something like the 4chan frog is Keck, has these weird Mormon beehive freaking runes on the side of it. I mean, geez, and then you can tie that into Skinwalker Ranch because we're talking about the singularity. Obviously, I don't know. Our X Church thing is working. Like clearly, the Mormon space time traveler thing I'm all about has already done something because we're looking at, and like for whatever reason, anomalously, Utah is a major portal zone for the Skinwalker Ranch, thing.
Mhm.
So all of this with the Bell Tech, but the idea of the Bell Labs created everything cool. It's just really they were taking technology we already had from Germany, like the LED, the super transistors that were a tenth of the size that the Americans had, and eventually the MOSFET semiconductor, right, 1947, right after the war, we start producing this all through Bell Labs. So it's not IBM. It's Bell. Bell is the communication company, and they're cut up. They're cut up into hundreds of little companies, and by cutting them up into little companies, it makes it so hard to find the paper trail of the military industrial complex to figure out what technology exists. But think about how
Welcome
advanced
to
it was in 19
compartmentalization.
yeah, like 1950s America is hundreds of years ahead of where we're at now on that level. Right? Like if you just but you shatter the levels of communication so that nobody knows that, and you're able to keep this technology in so what do you have? You have exactly the same stuff that they're showing you in 1950s. Video phones, a computer terminal, a cloud network, artificial intelligence from a network that can scan all of this and to combine information together. Nothing new. Nothing new since this point, right? The anti-monopoly case. Brilliant. And then what happens? What's the biggest company in the world after that? Because Bell was the biggest company. So what do you do when you cut Bell? Who's the biggest company?
AT&T or
No, no, no. Exxon. Exxon, because petroleum, right?
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because then there's no
Hmm.
more reason for in military industrial innovation. That's kept secret.
Right,
right?
of course. Yeah,
All
yeah.
it
No, no,
is,
of
yeah.
course. And this is the actually describing the train of thought I had because, people can speculate about breakaway, this and that. There's, again, I'll mention all the lost or not lost German U-boats and 100 million things, but it really very, very much seems like as if latest, sometimes in the 40s, if there wasn't, a reset even 100 years earlier where that already happened again or something, there really was all type of technology that simply turned out to be too effective, too efficient, not suitable for a capitalist economy or scarcity-based economy. And these things just were sequestered and hidden systematically so that this joke of a scarcity can keep running. I mean, that's honestly my perception. I mean, either there are real issues in terms of mass scaling these things, but I honestly just think if there are things like anti-gravity and so on, or teleportation, like we spoke about last time in whatever variant, or even just a FN Concorde or something, it's obvious, there's a limit in terms of what technology should be accessible in any way, shape, or form to the public. And I very much do have the suspicion that a big factor, of course, here, I mean, suspicion, is control. Because if you don't give people the energy, the health, and the transportation technology, you know, how many more smartphones do you want? And even here, then, my real question would be, or even your estimate, what do you think are the real processing capacities if there is even, let's say, a breakaway, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, microchip technology, let's say, or more advanced transistors or something, which were just wholesale shielded from the public. The public was left with x86 or now RISC to keep developing further. And they knew, okay, in 20, 30 years, we're slowly going to release the thing and then you're going to have a decent smartphone and whatever. But something that potentially is a much, much more effective or a different type of a technology simply is completely hidden from the public. That's
I think
how
you
it looks
got,
like to me.
so it depends on how big you are into like multiverse. Like, so if you believe in the capacity of a range of universes existing simultaneously, then you probably already have this happen, and we're just the universe trying to force it not to happen as long as possible. And there's a range of time, so it could have happened in ancient, like a singularity could have been achieved in ancient Babylon, right? Like it could be that there's already one universe where somebody figured it out. Okay, it might have been that a bunch of universes start figuring it out around the 19th, 20th century. Maybe you get to the point where, like World War II, a bunch of German universes figure out the singularity. And maybe that doesn't end up true for our universe and a bunch of other universes, but there's a certain point where the singularity is inevitable, right? At a certain point, like in the 21st century, probably within the next 50 years, so many universes will hit to a point like a hundredth monkey where they all start to figure out zero G, start to figure out how to control and manipulate space matter, where they can create the next moment synthetically, not based on the repercussions of the expected consequences of reality. And that would be the singularity on a multiversal level, where it's just inevitable and it's just spiraling around this point in time that isn't time. It's where non causal moments become possible, right? Where time essentially ends, like linear time ends, and it becomes just a moment inside of this new arrangement of space time that we create. And that could be like something that's already happened. Like it could have been that atomic explosions in the 1940s in some realities have done that, but in a lot of ways we're living in the universe that's been perpetually kept from this happening, which you can see, like this universe seems like a spiral out of control from the 1940s. Right? This is we're missing the atom punk futurism that we saw going. And there's a crazy, I don't mean to sound like Marty McFly and Doc, but like there's a deviation, Marty. There's a deviation in the timeline here. I don't know, that's what it looks like.
I mean, it's certainly a deviation. Currently, I have to say I'm not exactly sure in terms of the whole, multiple
Right.
concurrent realities. Well, definitely what
Yeah.
should be
I don't
said
like it
is
either because it
if,
sounds like no free will. I agree.
well, we can debate about all of those as well, but if that would be a thing, then it would be, I guess, mathematically almost impossible that there would not already be a instanced universe or whatever that has achieved a singularity and whatever tunneled back to all realities or whatever would happen exactly. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
That's
So
exactly
because
what seems
so
probable.
there's kind of a catch-22 here in a sense, seems to me a little bit.
No, no, I
Um,
think I think you kind of call out the inevitable obviousness, right? So whomever we're about to become in the future that's about to end space-time are probably ourselves
No,
as
that's the
our own
thing.
gods. We're probably our own progenitors that go
Well,
back in
maybe.
time and start everything.
Well, from a certain point of view, that could be a conceptualization, even though it may not be exactly, let's say, explicitly correct in those explicit terms, just because there's too many variables. Yeah, so it could be progenitors. All I'm thinking is, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
All right, fair enough.
Moving back in time, moving forward in time. Basically, no, what I wanted to say actually is, if you're saying there is this state to be accessed or whatever by humans, it's also here impossible to conceive that the non-locality or non-linear time space is not something that must always be concurrent with whatever linear thing we are experiencing here, right?
Yeah, so at a certain point,
So it
what happens
must
is
already
linear.
exist. I don't think that we can create non-locality, non-linearity. I think that's in whatever metaphorical or whatever other sense, anyhow, the basis, and then the linearity that we experience must just be
I
spin-offs
think
from that.
you could have so maybe you could have a parallel non-locality. So let's say you have a simultaneous like let's say you're outside of it in some sense. Maybe you could be underground or something. Maybe Antarctica is the whole point. Like you have a
That's the
society
whole
that's
point. You go deep enough under the ground and time
yeah
stops, yeah?
yeah like so. But and this is why so many of these anomalous things happen in state parks around granite. Right? Because granite's so solid that if you were to build something in granite, you would have a time capsule that in that granite for maybe a certain amount of thousands or tens of thousands of years, things are safe in the granite. And similar like Antarctica, we don't have maps except for a few very anomalous maps for until the 19th century that even show it. So it's something that's completely outside of the consciousness, and you can keep it under the ice. This would make sense so that you have something that doesn't affect the timeline that creates you except for where you want it to, right? And so there might be circumstances where you have miracles. There might be circumstances where people are doing seances in the 19th century and you go back and you mess with them. But for the most part, you have to be very careful about messing with the timeline because it's not just this multiverse like you're talking about. Even if there is, most of those universes end very quickly because they're not the best timeline. They have to be as close to a perfect thing as possible. So realistically, there is an omega point that is the longest timeline, and it ends with not just destruction but order. And that's also part of the singularity because the singularity is as things are getting smaller, things are getting closer together. So there's less there's less if you're thinking about like a supercapacitor and there's an electron going around a maze, at a certain point there's no more line because the maze is getting thinner and thinner and thinner that it's just next to itself. So does it become chaotic order because it's naturally ordered at that point that it doesn't even need the labyrinth anymore because it just knows where to go? Could energy become that divinely ordered? That's probably the singularity.
All right.
Cool. All
No,
right.
because yeah, well, I have more questions about this. We can continue this discussion another time.
Yeah, I mean, if you like, whatever. He's
Sure,
our
always.
buddy. We like
It's
this
just it's
guy,
not gonna
Hamamoto.
stop so quickly, so
Yeah.
yeah, he's cool. No, I'm just again pointing it out because he's keeping like tabs and giving his perspective. Nothing too much to discuss. It's like the ongoing drama, but he's always interesting to listen to. So I guess I was just watching it this week, and he's talking about Tommy Motola, who even in one of his last speeches, Michael Jackson said that Tommy Motola is the devil. So make of that what you will.
You're gonna have to pop on for a second and get my power cable.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Tommy Motola basically was the CEO for Sony for about 10 years, from what I understand. Maybe not currently, but like the former CEO. And basically, what he's talking about here, Hamamoto, is also about the concept of ownership. And it's quite interesting that he's like giving for lack of a better term, quote unquote, Asian ethnic perspective. And he's also pointing out basically how, different groups, even racially, are relegated to different positions in terms of social archetypes presented. Like he's saying, for example, the Asian men are relegated to like nerds to work for Google instead of actually maybe being the owners of their own company. And I guess this is the point he's making, that in music industry, at least in the official mainstream history we have, from what I understand, Michael Jackson actually kind of crossed over Sony or whatever, or managed in any case to have maybe more of a stake or ownership than he should have had. Of course, there's also the ongoing conspiracy, and there's all these interesting images, whereas you see Michael Jackson's son hanging out with an individual that supposedly was Michael Jackson's biggest fan, quote unquote. And then you see certain scenes and you're wondering, maybe Michael Jackson always was his own biggest fan. So, well, there we go into multiple layers of speculation and conspiracy. So I see David, I'm saying already, Andreas, you put yourself up, but you hit the screen from us.
I'm trying my best to get this microphone back on because I had some cable problems here, but it should be okay.
Oh, you're doing fine.
All right, here we go. Millions watch you may. Sorry, I have to get my microphone over here. You read this one.
All right. Yeah. I wasn't even sure if you want to read it, but we brought him up again. Before millions watch University of Maine grads videos debunking pseudoscience. No, and I haven't even seen his recent stuff. He's just one of those examples I brought up before, where I'm like, I'm so positively amazed by certain individuals' meteoric rise, dare I say, in certain topics, and I'm still haven't completely figured out how these actually
rise. Sorry.
Meteoric rise.
Meteoric mediocre.
No, SpaceX launch rise. But
yeah, but this
if the,
guy's such a
if the camera
such a
if the camera is properly adjusted, then it keeps looking as if the rocket keeps going up and not going sideways. So that's why I'm saying it's all about the camera angle. But anyways, it's just curious to me. Maybe one day we'll figure it out how this actually happens. Yeah. I mean, it's not here. Certainly, probably some things. I'm not even saying that the content is no good at all or whatever, but it's just usually quite a select perspective on history. And yeah, again, I'm just always surprised how these things come to be, and I would love to know the backgrounds.
Yeah, it's a bummer, dude.
One day, maybe.
What about Glenn Keely?
And then
Glenn Keely's all right.
Oh yeah, well, you skipped him over. You know him?
No, but he just looks like look at his eyes. You can just tell.
Yeah, so this guy, actually, you switched over one video, which was from Douglas Dietrich. We can listen to for 1 minute, but in a
really? Cool. I was
second.
just thinking about Douglas the other day. I think what we were just talking about with Antarctica and the Nordic Hyperboreans and everything, that's basically his whole bread and butter. That's like his whole thing.
Yeah. Right. Someone who wants to know more about this, listening to him. But here we have.
If you think about it, like if humans continue to genetically modify themselves, transhumanists will probably look like anime characters, right? Like bigger, younger, brighter
just
eyes.
Watch the Congress. Just watch the Congress. So, but I mean, before you go into that, I can just briefly show Glenn Keely, because I just want to very briefly talk about him. This was just recommended to me via email. Thank you very much. I started listening to it. It's a little bit, how should I say, maybe difficult to verify, because even he himself in the beginning says he can't just, tell you the story. He can't tell you, much more about the sourcing. And just to anyone who's into deep, like, ideas of long past history and development of humans, you may want to check it out. I found it curious that this was uploaded so many years ago, has a few hundred views, but is apparently relevant or interesting enough that I get an email about this. For me, it's just always difficult then listening to any type of historical explanations. I noticed, unfortunately, they may not even have heard of any type of, mathematical falsification of history, new chronology, or anything like that. Then, unfortunately, immediately, only in my individual heuristics, the likelihood of the veracity reduces by about 90%. So, but still, anyhow, is into like deep dives, and obviously this guy had time to think about what he's saying and come up with his theories. You can listen to this. From what I understand, there's even like several parts of this, so you can listen to this guy for like quite a few hours, but probably just for a very peculiar individualistic perspective, probably something interesting to check out for those that want to do these deep dives. Whereas for me, at least currently, it is unknown how much of the information can be verified. All right, and then actually at the same vein, talking new chronology, surprise, you can pull up the Dietrich thing, and it's at 4 hours 15. Maybe put on the CC. If we don't have audio, we don't necessarily need it. Should be enough to to just read off of it.
Let's see if we can get
4:15.
there. I think I could probably. I'm gonna risk it, just that way. Like we'll get his attention. I'll be like, yeah. And by the way, Doug, we love you. Here you go.
That Osiris is even a god.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You
It's
can.
one of the
Yeah.
Egyptian god puns.
Thank you.
Oh, pause.
Yes,
Pause.
there you go.
Okay.
Basically, right here they are talking. I think Douglas already brought up Anatoly Fomenko, and if I chose the time code right, within the next minute we should basically hear Douglas Dietrich's opinion about Anatoly Fomenko and new chronology.
Okay. Right here.
I appreciate that profoundly. There you go. And it tells us all we need to know about how your media is controlled, and it's not to your benefit. And then we get these Russian guys coming in and making it worse. So Fomenko calls this compressed version of what he calls the fibrid. He calls it fibrid. He spells it fibred, F-I-B-R-E-D, the Fiber Structure Chronicle. So, or the Fibered Chronicle. The three chronicles, B, C, and D, were embedded into A by considering each one as a rigid block and shifting them forward by approximately 333, 1053, and 1778 years, respectively. Now, he's a mathematician, so it'd be 333 years, 1053 years, and 1778 years of respective distortions in history that he puts into mathematical equations to make it all look academic, but it's really all just shit. So, how did Dr. Fomenko even decide how far to shift his dates? Well, the answer goes to the heart of why his theory makes so little fucking sense.
Ooh.
He
Spicy.
says he decided to apply his knowledge of advanced mathematics to the study of history. He began by studying the astronomical phenomena recorded in Ptolemy's Almagest, a text from the 2nd century that cataloged the positions of 1028 stars and introduced the concept of the epicycle to explain the retrograde motion of the planets. Fomenko is of the opinion that the Almagest actually records astronomical phenomenon from the 7th through to the 13th century. He detailed his reasoning in geometrical and statistical methods of analysis of star configurations. That's how I translate that from the Russian. The title of his work was Statistical Methods of Analysis of Star Configurations. So he used this, how would I call it, this hoax, to basically, date Ptolemy's Almagest. Now, without my getting into the complex mathematics, because of course it's all shit anyway, there's nothing to really get into, the Fomenko method of analyzing the stars does not quite prove his point. Oh, here we are. So tell us about the Japanese Romaji Oshirisu no
Okay, I think that's it.
Sekoryu.
All right.
So, but anyhow, so even
Basically.
just imagine he has like these 12-hour streams 2-3 times a
And he
week.
sounds like
And of
Bob
course then-
Dobbs more than I do. He's like full-on sub-genius right now. And now, for
And
the next
then-
limited time offer, we're going to tell you the conspiracy about... I like you, Doug. I like you.
No, I think is amazing. But anyways, imagine
Yeah.
he's doing this like extremely long streams, and I'm perfectly honest, I'm not, of course, listening to all of them. And even here, I was just like, oh, he's streaming. I'm gonna, just skip in
Pop
or
in, check
whatever.
it out, yeah.
And literally after just listening a few minutes, if even that much, I suddenly hear him talking about Fomenko. And I was like, yay, at least he's giving his opinion. I think I even saw this live, actually, because I was commenting in chat and saying like,
Mhm.
oh, don't you, I don't know, want to take a closer look, this and that. So from what I understand, he's like referring it back to the Almagest. Here I just know David also spoke about the Almagest and like analyzing it and showing like certain issues there are with it from what I understand. I'm not exactly sure if I completely understand Douglas's criticism, and also I'm not exactly sure if there's not some sort of, let's say, anti-Russian bias or something, for lack of a better term, where Fomenko just gets lumped in, even though both Fomenko and Nosovsky at least publicly state that, again, they did not receive any peculiar support from the government. But again, Fomenko was a mathematics professor, maybe even the earliest at like 22 or 24 or something. And you have to look at his pictures. I showed this to you before, I think, in the translation with
Right.
Kurinoy, right? You see that this, I mean, to me at least, it's obvious this guy is a genius. And then anyone denigrating him for saying, oh, he's not even a historian, how should he know? Also, this is explained by both Gleb and Anatoly Fomenko,
Yeah.
that there is a good reason, because
I
those
think he's making
individuals
the
simply are
excuse,
pretty
though.
fenced in.
Yeah, but like Douglas is trying to make the excuse that I think everyone makes, which is that we cannot trust historical record. You know, he's like, well, look, you're trying to tell me that their astronomical records are accurate. Well, why should I assume that they're accurate? That's something that David wouldn't say, right? That's a logical question to ask. I think the difference is when you're looking at the Muslim or the Jewish or the Catholic even astronomical records, they're a lot more objective than you might think at first, because that's basically all these people were doing. They were staring at the stars, measuring them, and jotting it down. And so you'd be like, oh wow, Halley's Comet 5,000 years ago. That's why we look at that stuff and say that there's something to it. It's not because it's just a bunch of poetry about the stars, and it's because they're actually metrics that they're keeping down. Like, this is what they meant when they said computers. They meant these people that were computing where the stars were, right?
Oh, and just as it's the topic right now, because just hear someone saying, oh, of course, in flamenco, that's my favorite
Oh man,
pronunciation
that
of
happened
this.
to me one time.
So,
Yeah, I was trying to ask them if they heard of flamenco in Spain, and they thought I was talking about flamenco. I was like, no, dude, no.
so yeah, and here all I can say is, I don't know, take a very close look and reconsider maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen, but if there is any, like LT, if you have any particular video of his or video title where you say he's talking about this in detail, I'd love to check it out and see exactly what his criticism is. Have you seen any, like, let's say, foundational criticism in terms of truly attacking the mathematical analysis that Fomenko has done, just in terms of showing, because even here, if we have records, even if they are whatever, forged or not, I can show mathematical patterns. That's purely a mathematical thing. And I can show that there is 90% similarity between the German kings and the French kings. So that would remain regardless of any sky observations, from what I understand. Of course, they are interlinked, but there's quite a few aspects. And to me, so far still, that's why I'm asking, I still have not seen a proper refutation of Fomenko's work, nor of David's expanded work regarding maybe some more recent history things. I haven't seen it yet. Have you?
Not really. I mean, I think for the most part, people have been open to the parts that are important, which are that there was far more communication in the Middle East and Europe than people like to admit during the Dark Ages. This is something that I think even it's hard. It's been really hard for Romans and for Greeks to admit. They're like, "Oh, the Dark Ages, the Dark Ages." But this come up recently. Like, the Dark Ages were not so dark. Just deal with it. And I think that offends some people still, but we're moving past that. That's probably the biggest thing, is like the amount of communication, how cool things were. But they'll say it was an isolated event. They'll try to say there's less people that really were privy or privileged by that. I think that's the next thing that we'll probably see. The next debunking will be how many people were benefited from this. Were the laymen really? I mean, because we could talk about the elite church academics and the boys who learned the new languages in the new schools and the new religious monasteries, but are they the same as the parents or the community? And I think that would be the interesting thing to talk about, like the janissaries and how that influences your community. I mean, today you have a kid who comes back home and he's been a Marine. It changes his neighborhood, right? They're like, oh wow, right? So that kind of I think is the same thing with the Ottoman Empire. They influenced it in a lot of ways by bringing order and discipline to people that didn't really have as much of that. They were living in the country, right? And all of a sudden they were taught city-like civilities, right?
For better or worse, yes.
Yeah, for better, for worse. Exactly. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, so next
Oh
up, what we
boy.
have, this is just, I guess, for people to listen to. I somehow stumbled across this. Anyone who wants to research language, I guess, supposedly the original pronunciation of Shakespeare. Although I'll
Shakespeare.
say right from the start, this was created by OpenLearn from Open University. This is coincidentally the university I studied at as well, but this is just remote studies for main part. But also should be noted, this was one of the, I mean, which university isn't, but certainly one of the Queen's favored universities, I believe, created originally to assist like working class people, because you basically could study part-time there or while working. Yeah, and here, I don't know, talking about Shakespeare.
Fair Verona, where we lay our sin, from ancient grudge bred to new mutiny, where civil blood led civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal lines of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife.
Yeah, it's like the classic British accent, like 16th century British accent. A bit more in the bit. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I didn't live there. For me, it's completely unknown whether that's correct or not, but I just thought it's interesting to share.
Yeah, who knows, right? I wonder about that too, like the Abraham Lincoln voice. We have an American idea of like what Abraham Lincoln sounded like. I'm like, who says? You know, like where's your recording? Like prove to me what's going on here. How about Use Merlo? Who's this guy? Hold on,
Yeah, so this is just one of those random guys that I came across. I'll see. Oh, right, because someone recommended to me a book of his. I didn't have time to check it out yet, but it sounded interesting enough. Probably just go to his bibliography, then it should be clear. Oh, there, even here it says in the first paragraph. So he was as already says, he was a Dutch-American doctor of medicine. He authored Rape of the Mind, Analysis of Brainwashing Techniques and Thought Control in Totalitarian States. So I guess this was a random chat comment or something I got, or comment on one of the videos. So I thought I'd share it. Probably along the lines of, what's his name? Either Bernays propaganda, but also How to Move the Masses, Gustave Le Bon, and there's a few other books in that vein.
Interesting. Thought control. Okay. The R of the mind. I'm gonna have to check this guy out a lot more. Okay. And then Mud Fossils fan says he should win a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, so this is by one of those, I don't know. Yeah, and also I brought it up because Sabine is here.
Dude, she's everywhere, yeah. She's like some sort of, she's kind of like the Luce for the Catholic Church or something. She's like some weird kind of like mystical figurine that's coming. She's like a symbol. She's an archetypical energy. She's an egregore. All right, keep going.
Apparently, so this channel is one of those channels that always, I don't know, yeah, likes to make fun of Earth-shaped talks, or I'm not sure what exactly. But and here also, this is a strange crossover. Actually, I'm only noticing now because again, this channel is known for, like, let's say, maybe not very differentiated Earth-shaped discussion bashing positions. But here he actually makes a video about Mud Fossil University. All I can do here is refer everyone back once again to the work of Stellium 7. He also speaks about Mud Fossil University, I believe, and actually points out that there is certain discrepancies or issues he has with his work. So I'm not even saying that this guy's criticism here may be completely unfounded, but it's just interesting that certain channels latch on to both, in this particular case, attacking the Earth-shaped discussions and denigrating them, and at the same time here attacking these history or archaeology discussions. It's, yeah, just a strange concentration of topics. I'm not exactly sure, whether this is organic or not, or whether if someone applies a certain scientism stance, then you automatically go against certain particular areas that you, for some reason, consider are unscientific, quote unquote. But yeah, I just found it curious that this guy brings up Mud Fossil University. But again, everyone check out Stellium 7 if you want to have a real refined view, let's say, of what Mud Fossil University has been doing.
Yeah, to be honest, like, just objectively more awesome and based. Even though he's our friend and we're biased for saying that, it's just true.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. What about Alhambra, which is a fun place, or is that just?
Oh yeah, so these I just brought it up
Yeah.
because if someone wants to look at nice pictures,
Oh,
unfortunately, it's
unavailable in my
again
country.
one of the from Arte, which is like the German-French documentary channel. Yeah, I'm sure nice pictures. I'm sure you can find it elsewhere. Just or use a VPN or something. But I
It's
just had to
annoying.
bring it in. I had to bring it in because of the famous Alhambra decree of 1492, an official timeline, where it seems as if either, depending on your view, I guess the Jews or the Muslims were expelled finally. I
I'm
guess they
trying to
call it
find
Treaty
my
Alhambra decree.
live. I have footage of me in Alhambra, like walking around live on my channel.
Oh, sweet.
I'll put it up somewhere easy to find later. What about this? This is the Pyramid of Success. Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know how this slipped in here. Again, we're not in perfect order, I think, but it's fine. This was just something fun I found somewhere, and why I like it so much is not only is it's a bit more complex or different than the known pyramid for the hierarchy of needs by Maslow, but also at the very top on the right-hand side, you can see patience. On the left-hand side, you can see faith. In the simpler versions, these two are extended along the whole side, so it's not so spliced up, let's say. But I just think it's pretty funny that at the very top of it still, okay, faith, all right, but also patience. I just think it's a nice reminder, yeah, to anyone in chat, of course, whereas I expect most of you to be top achievers, and then just remind yourself, faith and patience. So
And then this is this is the video I can't see any of your cool videos without a
yeah,
VPN.
that's the
If you
next
guys
thing
want to
not
watch these
allowed to see.
videos, click on the VPN link for Exertus or the
Exactly.
VPN link for NordVPN, and you can watch these videos.
And
I
it
could do it,
actually
but it would
works
screw up my
well.
stream. So yeah, it's not good to
And
do while I'm streaming though, because in YouTube
no,
and
no,
stuff,
no,
I think it'll screw
no,
it
no,
up.
no. But anyhow, here, this is simply a video with some strange art projects, but the main topic is the Vienna Metro. And of course, since underground things is a recurring theme, and at least to me, subways are very psychedelic,
True.
to anyone who wants to see what it looks like in Vienna, they can check out a video like that to see the Vienna Metro. I mean, I'm sure there's many random YouTubers also doing
Yeah,
videos
right.
like that.
I had that reminds me of something I had earlier. Let me see if I can find it. If I go back here on my Twitter page, go down the page a little bit, and it's got to be right here. Yes, an Austrian teenager has been rejected from the British School of Art in Rome for being a toxic artist at work. We should be really careful about Austrian artists, especially if they're vegetarian. Okay, now Alicia Joe, what about this?
Oh yeah, so this is a series of videos. You can maybe second and third one will be more interesting. So this guy, I can really give a shout out. Traukan and Promi is one of the OG researchers in the German-speaking region who's been into like symbolism and all of these things for, I don't know, 10 plus
Nice.
years. The moniker itself, Traukan and Promi, literally means trust no celebrities, which I guess is a recurring theme. And what he
It's a
does
good rule of thumb, yeah.
is a few things. So what he does here is just basically showing that now that the whole what happens with those rappers topic comes up, you have a few new big channels suddenly making big videos about it, but accidentally or deliberately not relaying the information correctly. So basically here's just, I want to say, fact checking that. And also just to know the reason you can see his handle Traukan and Promi 3 and only 15,000 subscribers. That's because even only within this year, I believe, I already was on Traukan and Promi 1 and 2. So he's going through his channels fast. He's regularly getting thrown off, basically. So this is one thing. It's about the whole rapper thing. Can be interesting, but even more interesting are the next two videos, also by him. So about Rote Lügen and then the assassination attempt. So here, this is very interesting. And unfortunately, I have reason to assume that this will also tie back to the situation in America. What is basically shown here is certain very strange connections. In this case, you have, let's say, the Freedom Party for Germany, called AfD, which is Alternative for Germany. this was only founded maybe 10, 15 years ago. And here he's pointing out that it's not only Maximilian Krah, it's also the current chief Alice Weidel, for example, that they are outwardly, let's say, proponents of certain ideas, but then behind closed doors seem to have potentially other types of allegiances. And the most important thing I want to point out here, and this is just my very superficial view, and I'll just speak for Germany now, or German-speaking region, but I sense it is kind of similar in America, which is the following. If you, I don't know, follow basic logic and just look at the main appearances, I would say, for example, or let's stay with America, I mean, which of the two individuals between Harris and Trump seem more capable, like on the surface of it, as individuals?
I mean, like, one can sit for 3 hours and have a conversation, and the other cannot.
Right. There's many more instances, but this could be one good example. So you could naturally say this seems to be the more competent individual. However, then when you check out all the background connections they have and what are, the both networking connections, financial connections. For example, one of the individuals involved in AfD was like a Goldman Sachs employee, and then they attend, for example, this Kra guy, they attend very particular business schools in Colombia or whatever, where then strangely enough, you both have apparent supposed, if I'm not mistaking this now, let's say both, basically you have individuals that seem to be outwardly portraying completely different ideologies, but at the same time they seem to be best buddies or they know each other. So all I want to point out, and I'm still not sure what the proper term is, how do you call that when you have like you're tricking someone, but like you're tricking them twice? I'm still not sure how to say that in English. In terms of that, first, I would make people assume that something is a superior solution or maybe is a way to go forward. But actually, if I would look really closely at both options given, then I find that in the background, they all again seem to tie back to the same idea. I'll just give one example where I deliberately checked this out, and I remember myself, this was the Obama election. So who could that have been? Obama versus, who did Obama run against?
McCain, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And there was one election where I just checked out the official donor lists, and this was the official lists. And literally you could see the same three banks in the top 5 for both of them. And even just considering that, I'm like, I don't know how much I can trust the political theater. And this guy basically does really good background analysis. Anyone who really wants to understand deep dive for Germany, but from what I understand, similar things could apply to America. And the last video I'm showing here is about the Trump event. And also, I hadn't seen his video before, but also he is, let's say, highly suspicious of the official narrative. And also, it's oftentimes a matter of how do you cut a video? What is the perspective you put in it? Not this one, maybe the third one. This is the least interesting. This is about Germany, and the third one then is about the Trump event. Yeah, and he's putting up the Illuminati cards, but quite a few other things and question marks. And also here, what I really like, if you go back with the female agents, that he also points out, well, now understandably, all the Republicans, let's say, can go insane and be like, oh my God, he got the bad Secret Service agents, they defunded them, and why are all the women there? And then you can bicker about women being incompetent or not, or whatever. When again, the true narrative may still be that this was all a huge stage setup, which, if you would have to ask me, is still my very honest opinion from all the information I can glean. Makes it seem
That's
that
a
way.
major compliment, though, because what you're basically saying is that they're ultimately the greatest showman, theatric magicians in history. Like, for someone to
These women,
that's
for
like
sure, that's without a question.
no, all of them, and Trump, because the idea that you have to understand, like, what you're saying is that to shoot, like, this is the classic carnival trick. Someone's got an arrow, and there's a guy who's spinning, or someone's throwing knives, and it goes right over their head. A woman throws a knife at the man, or vice versa. I just saw a knife show at the Renaissance Fair, and a guy, she threw the knife at his crotch, and luckily it hit just wrong that it bounced off his pants. but like she nearly just castrated the guy. Like people love knife shows at a Renaissance fair. So I think this is the same thing. You've got the perfect show. This is the magician's trick. The magician actually gets just part of their ear grazed because they move. I mean, it's really, on one hand, it's almost impossible to miss that shot to hit someone's head. On the other hand, it's almost impossible not to accidentally kill somebody if you're trying to graze their ear. So it's the perfect carnival trick. It's the perfect circus. I don't know. I think that's the thing. You're basically saying they deserve to be president when you say that you think it's fake.
Obviously,
That's what that means.
yes,
That's what that means, right? They're the best showman in
obviously,
history. Yeah.
but it does not necessarily mean that he's also the best stuntman, because as a
Pretty
magician, you
simple.
only have to make people believe that you're throwing the knives, to stay with that example,
True.
and then may
But
well make it look like you have been grazed, as they say.
yeah, but I mean, also
Oh
singularity
yeah, and
wise,
also, just briefly,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, here it seems very good, singularity wise. So he
Yeah.
says master of illusion. What's interesting is I put this up under the section better PR, where we're not there yet, but where you have Joe Rogan Experience, and I just want to point out, and this is super ultra superficial numerology, but still, the Joe Rogan Experience that Trump was on was 2219. 22, and this was always the obvious thing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is considered the fool. He's being called the fool by many. So I would definitely say, along with the emperor, maybe that's the main archetype he's given. And even here, to those who know, 22 reduces to 4. So the fool is related to the emperor archetype in tarot for sure. I mean, at least with the modern numerology system that I understand are being used. So you have the fool archetype, and then in his episode, it's 2219. 19 is the sun. You have Trump's Apollo room, the golden suit he has or something in one of his towers. Many other strange connections here. And also, and I guess there's First Amendment. I mean, I think also Trump is a defender of that, which I can appreciate, at least to some extent. I'd even have to, let me put it like this. I mean, I would not be the only one, but who currently is the front runner for Antichrist nomination from your point of view? Because by now I have to say, unfortunately, I have a pretty specific bet.
I nearly knocked over my laptop, and that's my answer to that. So, how about Johann Ludwig Burckhardt?
Oh yeah, so he's amazing. He's a cool guy, because this is the guy, and initially this was brought up to me by David, but someone recently commented in a chat again, and I was like, this is a good guy to bring up again, because I think his name is so fun and it's so ridiculous. Because the basic idea, you can watch David's videos or do your own research on that, but simply put, this guy is portrayed here. It's portrayed to be a Swiss traveler. Again, the Swiss. This is also what I recently heard, that the Saud family actually is the Savoud family from Switzerland, and they only emigrated in the early 20th century. So here again, you have some strange Orientalist from Switzerland. And if anyone has any familiarity with the Muslim scripture or Islamic scripture, this is the individual known in the Hadith as Al-Bukhari. So yeah, basically you had a German or a Swiss guy writing the Hadith for you. At least this is the idea David Jung Jr. puts forward, and seems to unfortunately make too much sense. And then again, makes you ask the question, if they are following, let's say, any strange tenets or whatever, always verify, is it really Quranic? And even here, check the translations, check all the issues, basically watch all of David's videos related on the topic at least, and some Fomenko to get a bearing on this idea. But today people could complain and say like, oh, crazy people, they're following this and that Hadith, see what's written there, it's so ugly, it's so crazy, it's so insane. But they don't mention that this was written by a European guy only 150 years ago. And now they're complaining against it, and this, of course, how you can see how, I don't know, crazy religious positions are being set up over 150 years to then allow for a completely artificially and forged clash of civilization, which has nothing to do with anything organic, any desert religion emerging and coming up with crazy ideas, but it's literally the Swiss European traveler from 1890, going there, then pretending to be a Muslim 50 years later in the books and writing you the
Maybe
potentially
he
crazy
really thought he
hadith.
was a Muslim,
No, I'm sure.
right? Like I was thinking a lot this week about René Guénon, right? This freaking guy who was a French philosopher in an existentialist period who kind of rebelled against what he saw as the inevitable now of contemporaneous society, the post-truth, post-moral, post-modern society coming. And he was like, we should be careful. This is before Dada really destroyed everything and before World War II took off. So he really saw it coming, and he's like, what we need is some sort of a return to order, maybe a new Prometheanism, associate that with, fascism or Catholicism. But for him, he chose Islam, right? He became a Muslim. So René Guénon became Abdul Wahid Yahya, right? And when we think about the Anglo Sufic, I'm going to call it Islam, metaphysical Islam, transcendental Marxism, and metaphysical Islam. This is your boy, right? René Guénon. But a lot of these different characters were too. And so when they talk about Islam, I think we should look at it like, obviously, there's two strains, there's two sides of the coin. It's not going to be just, I don't know. We need to see Islam as something a bit more metaphysical, and this is the way to do it. You need a second, you said?
Oh, I need a second. No, I'm good.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw a private
Oh yeah,
message
you
that
did,
sent.
but that was when
long
Douglas was
ago?
talking. So
Oh,
yeah.
it was long ago. Okay. Well, Tomb of Aaron is also interesting because he was at the Tomb of Aaron. Our boy Ludwig, when he met Ludwig Burckhardt, when he
Oh, in
was
Petra.
told, when he was
Mhm.
told that Petra existed, he was on the road towards Aaron, brother of Moses' tomb. So I find that also kind of interesting, like the tie together to this kind of religious pursuit that he had. How about that knees sweating and arms spaghetti, whatever the heck. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of Eminem to begin with. I thought Malibu's Most Wanted hit harder, but when Obama does it, it's really crap. You know what I mean? Like it's just like it's a new level of bad because he's just so lame. He's just the lamest freaking guy. I don't know. It's hard not to find this guy lame. He's not only is he a genociding, Dick Cheneyite genocider, but also he's just so lame, right? And to pretend to be cool, it's confusing me. Sorry, I hate to take a stand like that, but sweat and spaghetti. Okay, what was your point?
Well, the only thing I can think of here is maybe his education was too white, and then he kind of. This is also racist to say if I'd say that he would be naturally more cool if he had received less political
indoctrination. Well,
indoctrination.
I think that's the thing. So, like, Obama went to a school in Indonesia where, like, the Dutch royals went, and he had slaves dress him every morning. So, like, that hits hard. Like that's gonna change your life. In a way, I just feel like people don't understand. Like, if you have slaves dress you every morning as a child, you're gonna be a different kind of person. All right, wait. Lolo Sodera? Oh, whoops. Anyway, Joe Rogan, Donald 2219. Yes, this was a fun episode. I just saw part of the Vance one.
Oh yeah, and because even here I have to say again, if just like listening to politicians, I mean, it's obvious this guy is and always been a lot more fun to listen to. And just like with Putin, but again, also here, you have to look at the background connections then. But on the surface level, I want to say like it's obvious that, I don't know, these individuals are made to appear more competent, and that's supposed. But then again, they kind of reveal themselves in the last 20 minutes, at least to me, when they start gushing over Mars or something like that. And
Did
I'm
you
like,
feel like Trump made himself seem more intelligent here? Because all I saw was him talk about the Civil War and the South at the very beginning. Like, if you open up talk about Robert E. Lee being not a bad guy, like you're gonna like, there's no way the Democrats are not gonna look at that a certain way. But it's ironic because the Democrats were racist, the KKK, and part of Robert E. Lee's whole thing. So the weirdness of trying to appeal to them at their own level, I just thought was fascinating. And also the same thing, like Joe Rogan
just
did
briefly,
not.
who do you think he tried to appeal to, just to understand?
You mean at the very beginning or just in general?
Well, in general, because I don't think he was talking to any Democrats here. like
No,
just
no,
to
no. Well,
undecided voters.
I just think at the very beginning when he talks about Robert E. Lee and the Civil War, because in the United States we had, the War of Northern Aggression is where after the Prussian Confederate War, a bunch of Prussians were in the South as well, and Louisiana, all these quilted states. So Robert E. Lee would have supported a democracy that would have been every state had self-determination, and he was from Virginia, so when Virginia decided to be with Maryland and with the North, he was kind of stuck with the Confederacy choice, like the fact that the state had gone with the South. So he couldn't, even though he believed theoretically in the abolition of slavery and everything else, and he was a decent. I think most Americans like him as a person, but he fought for the South because that's what side his state was on. So he had to defend, and at the end of the war, he shook the hand of like every soldier. He's like, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I am so sorry." Like I let you all down. It was like that. So on one level, that's pretty cool, but I think a lot of people they associate the South kind of the way that Germans are context as being fascistic or the villains of the Halloween movie. The South is, right? The South is looked at as being dumb. The South is looked at as being ignorant. The South is looked at as being backwards, which is just historically not the case. The South was always the higher civility region of the United States. You had better industry, better education, better, community debutantes and balls, and just at a certain point we destroyed the South, and so we look at the South as a place that is constantly, perpetually similar to Baghdad, just bombed out and destroyed, and with Kmart's and Walmart's and genocide. But the South didn't used to be that way, and so I think that's the other thing is that the Democrats, the Democrats today we look at as being the social justice warriors, but the Democrats were the KKK. The Democrats started out as the most racist party. No, I mean, it is what it is. And in the same way that Reagan used to be a Democrat and became a Republican, the Republicans and the Democrats have swapped several times. And at that point in history, we think of the Dixiecrats, right? The Dixiecrats were the continuity of racist white Democrats who wanted to have majority over their zones, and their idea of democracy was very similar to the Turks' idea of democracy over the Kurds. We're in charge. There's more of us than you, right? That's what they meant by democracy, by Democrats.
Hey, this is the best explanation for democracy I've heard in a long time in terms of what the actual logical underpinnings are. I will not
shout
disagree
out to the
with you
Kurds,
now.
because we like Kurds. We love the Kurds. We kid the Turks, but we love the Kurds. Oy vey. All right, Austria, we're going to look up as a place. It's like a big red line, big white line. I feel like you should just do all your roads like this. Like, what if Austria, you just had red roads with a bright white line? Hear me out. You know what I mean? No. Okay, what about the flag of Austria? What
Just on topic, someone says Putin Road. I'm not sure if that's like related to the name. To me, Putin always just sounds like put in, like he was put in. And at the very least, for me, if you look at his old pictures from early 2000s, same with Biden, same with quite a few other individuals, let me just say they look very, very, very different. So either they had like, I don't know what, life-changing, physicality-changing events, or it's just different individuals. Here I just wanted to bring up the site because it's someone recently had asked me about like Freemasonry in Austria or something like that, and I was referencing a few things, also few things from Trau keinem Promi, whom I showed earlier, Trust No Celebrity. But this site is generally great. I brought it up once or twice before. I just thought I'd share it again. Wikispooks. I'm unfortunately very certain this is not a comprehensive list, but there is quite some relevant information contained here where you can simply trace certain individuals. And I just want to show one example. Unfortunately, this will only really be relevant to anyone who knows about Austrian politics, but there was a very famous and well-known politician. You can even search for him maybe. On the top right, there is a search bar. His name is Bruno, B-R-U-N-O, Bruno, and then Kreisky, which is K-R-E-I-S. It's already there, yeah. Kreisky. This is just his image, but you can go to his page. And there was a time when Austria was basically during his reign, let's say, was very active in foreign politics. And it's kind of funny to me that today in Austria, and politicians are trash, let's say, and they have no say in foreign anything, and most are laughing at the Austrian government by now, I would say. So have very little credibility or anything like that. But there was this time when, oh, we were so important. We had this great chancellor, Bruno Kreisky, and he made lots of debts and all kinds of other things, but he was well liked. I may well imagine he did some things which were potentially good for Austria. I haven't looked in his track record in detail. But then I just saw another comment which basically said one of his closest consigliere or something was longtime Bilderberg steering committee member. And then, of course, what comes to my mind is that it's not only because you have a certain personality in office that maybe just, is a great diplomat or something like that, but it may just well be that they have very close and proper connections to certain organizations, whereas, of course, through those back channels, then in the public perception of foreign policy, you may suddenly appear to be the greatest grandmaster simply because you are in the right few meetings and events and have some few proper telephone numbers that simply make it a completely different ballgame, whether it's you who is the president of Austria, which is a maximum 8 million population area. You can also be the president of Austria again 5 years later, but if you have the proper telephone book and the proper connections, suddenly your foreign policy will be very relevant and heralded, and 30 years later, 40 years later, people will still talk about it in the like mystified sense, I want to say, because
Right.
even the commentators you have, they don't look at stuff like that. They don't even consider that. They really just buy hook, line, and sinker the mainstream story. Oh, so great. But that maybe he was so great because of his telephone book, just, to put it mildly, is never even spoken about. I'm sure you can find many different examples here for America and other places as well.
This is pretty
But yeah,
practical, though. I didn't realize how much Wikispooks had on the Bilderberg meetings, and that's really practical to know what sort of like. 'Cause every year, if you go back, especially to the '70s, and you start to look at the industrial powers building and shaping the G10 summits, really, it all starts here. The collapse of the Soviet order and the beginning of the new corporatist East, right? Because out of the Soviet corporatist East, you get like Asia and all the money in Singapore and the hundreds of billions of dollars that were stolen from the Malaysian and the Singapore stock exchange, right? By the Scottish bankers, which, that's
there's a few conspiracies surrounding, I believe, Filipino gold or something, and
Yeah.
there's quite a few stories.
The Philippines is a big one because of, it's named after King Philip, who shut down the Knights Templar. And so the Knights Templar and the Freemasons have a thing about that. And, so if there's a lot to the Philippines. It's also a perfect place to be. It's a perfect place to have ports, right? If you think about like the Barbary Coast, this is the Philippines are the new Barbary Coast for sure. But what
So I
about your
just
lady
want
here,
to,
though? Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry. What are you saying?
yes, no, just want to read the comment. Unfortunately, I can't read your name because I really don't read Cyrillic. So yes, in Russian, put means road. That's great to know. And then what I also like, the next comment, in bird language, also now I'm speaking bird language, that's great. It's put in, yes. And then it says the real name of Putin is Shelomov. Can't get better than that. I never heard that name. I never looked it up. Have you heard about this? Shelomov
I
as Putin's name.
don't think so. I don't know about Shalimov.
But I'm not exactly surprised that Vladimirovich is a artist name, let's say, actor name.
Interesting.
Okay.
Putin's parents, Vera Putina. I'll have to go dig into this a bit about the Shalimov thing. Tell me more about that. Nay, Shalimova. Yeah, Shalimova, right? His mother's maiden name. I do know that his mother. We go into that at some point. His mom seems kind of like a really interesting story. But what I agree with Raph. Who knows who is anyone after 20 years, right?
Not really, because you could say, yeah, it's just some, how they call it, artistic surgery and so on. But with some people, it becomes increasingly unlikely. And Putin is one of those examples.
Right.
Okay, so here, oh yeah, why did I bring this up? So we are still in the section East Turia, which, by the way, again, according to David, is one of the names for Austria, whereas Switzerland would be West Turia. So East Turia, yes. Geheime Absprachen. So this means secret discussions and broken promises. This is one quite well-known, you would say, quote-unquote, conservative commentator. What I find kind of curious is that quite a few individuals that now, at least in the public perception sphere, have some influence and some say or sway, at least 3 of them I can count easily, are former members of the party that Haida created. So we spoke last time about the guy with the great socks from Corinthia, Haida, who was then, some say he was killed, others say he was drinking too much, although he never drank, right? And shortly before his demise, a few years prior, he actually created a split-off party from the Freedom Party. And quite a few individuals then joined him because I guess they were just loyal to him as a personality or a politician. And then when that went under a few years later, and all the voter potential got reabsorbed into the Freedom Party, quite a few of this Haida party then emerged, let's say, as political pundits, or how do you call it, or like talking heads and so on, with overall, even though understandably they are lacking in certain perspectives, seem to be some of those with the most, at least apparent, most honest interest in, I'm not sure how to say it, some kind of preservation of culture in Europe, or even some kind of basic logic. And again, I'm mentioning this with the caveat, then even here you have to look at background connections. Quite a few of them, I want to say, are highly pro-Israel, for example. That's another strange thing that happened recently and also relates back to the AfD in Germany, where oftentimes it is being said that, oh, basically you are fascist and whatever else, or you are like, what is a different word to say except Nazi, but whatever, they're being called Nazis and whatever else, or portrayed in that fashion. But at the same time, often these political parties, both in Austria and Germany, actually have very tight relations to Israel, and sometimes even maybe at least to the party of Netanyahu. Of course, it's been the government party for a long time, but also just consider this is the nationalist axis. So it's also understandable how here on that nationalist idea level, they very much relate to each other. And of course, in most often cases, the anti-Semitism, defamation is usually unwarranted and just used for media hype, but slowly, no one's curious about that anymore. Anyhow, you have this guy who is one of these former, let's say, Haider party guys. He gives quite good analysis and insights, but what he's sharing here in this talk is that it is true, I had mentioned this last time, half a year before the current election happened, the parties that knew they were going to lose, which are all parties except the Freedom Party, they really literally already made secret agreements, and basically before the election, officially, not officially, but in written documents, decided how Austria is going to look like after the election, regardless of how many votes the Freedom Party would get, less they would get, maybe over 50%. But since that was expected to be very unlikely, so much in terms of conspiracy and so much in terms of how much does your vote really count. And the crazy fun thing is, this is a quite well-known pundit, and he's mentioned this on public television, at least on the private television, which maybe not so many people watch, but still it has quite some reach. So people kind of know about this. And I find it curious. Yeah.
Shady. Okay, well, oh, am I closer? What about this? The standard translated for Americans, though. Hold on. Keep going. Sorry.
Oh yeah, check out Andreas Exertus merch. The merch is fire. That is certainly correct.
I like that.
So here I just wanted
page though. Here. One more time. You getting it now? It's having some trouble.
I mean, the image basically says it all. This is just an article about public spaces in, I guess, Europe mainly. And what do you notice when you see this bench?
It would be really, really decent back support. You probably need to supply your own board, but it would be hard to sleep on. Is that what you're trying to get at? Like, it's not designed for homeless people?
Exactly.
Or it is ladder. It is designed for homeless people.
Exactly.
Is the thing. It's designed thinking about them all night long.
And I find that kind of curious that on the one hand, for example, in Austria, you would take quite a few immigrants. There's even calculations, whereas it says Austria per capita is one of the countries that took in the most immigrants, you give them quite, in many cases, quite a lot of money and support, whereas it's questionable. Oh yeah, immigrants, sorry, just to clarify, I'm talking about technically illegal immigration, because anybody who would be crossing into Austria already would have crossed a secure country. And technically, according to all the Dublin laws and all these regulations they have for refugees, the refugee would have to apply for asylum in the first safe country within the European Union. Since Austria is smack middle together with Germany, you can ask yourself the question why it is possible that so many refugees initially land there, or even in the transit moments, even in 2015, they literally got free tickets in Austria, for example. Oh, you want to, there's like, a million migrants at the border. Oh, you want to go to Germany or something? Here, take a free train ticket. Have fun,
Right.
yeah? So it's curious that you have this on the one hand, and on the other hand, I can't even have a nice bench. And I mean, I'd be happier if the homeless guy sleeps maybe with a light and on a bench that's somewhat whatever, if he really has nothing else. Than to make it so, let's say,
Well,
obviously antisocial public space. So
it's not
I find it
antisocial. Like, it's
repulsive.
designed, it's actually brilliant. It's designed so that you can sit on this thing for a period of time if you've been walking around. It's definitely more comfortable than walking around all day, but it's definitely something that you don't want to sleep on, so you have to move on. So it gives you sort of a amount of time that you can rest in public without you staying there for days on end and then sequestering and then monopolizing that space from the public. Now, I'm not really one for
Well,
that
but
kind of
this has
design, but it's
this no, the
brilliant,
thing
really.
is, this monopolization in terms of factually, I don't see that having ever occurred, because usually people that actually are homeless for whatever reason or for that night, they are very careful, and then when it gets light, they move away again or whatever. I mean, the only real world example I kind of saw of that, but not even really, was in San Francisco, where you have many
Yeah,
homeless.
I was gonna tell you, like,
But
I'm from the place where that's real. I'm just gonna say, like, it's pretty much like very gauge kind of here.
of
I
course, I
mean,
mean, maybe this is a point of how, what is the density of homeless, and from a certain density it would become problematic. But I would prefer to have a nice bench anyone could sleep on, and the density of actual homeless just being so low that it's really not a concern. But
dude, I wish I
yeah,
could find the one that I'm thinking of, but there was a dude in Santa Cruz who dug a hole in the park and they found his home. It was an underground, like cave, basically. It was amazing. I can't find it now. But basically, like, they went, oh, where is it, dude? Underground, digs underground home. Yeah, I think it's like this or something like that. Somebody built this like crazy little underground place and they found it finally in the park, but it had like a battery, it had like a little room, it had like an air filter. I think he even had like a shower or something. It was crazy. And he dug it out, dug this huge hole out into the Santa Cruz Park and had it hidden so no one could find it. I feel like on one hand that's pretty cool, but also like you can see how it could be dangerous because if there's an earthquake and he dies in there, no one finds him. But I guess that's his calling. I mean, if he wants to do that, there's
well,
also New York
maybe
City like
that's
that.
why all these underground tunnels that go from, as we said, Moscow to Berlin to Paris, and probably even through the water to America, or at least within America, we should just excavate and open up all these tunnels again. And either the hybrid lizards are going to come out and really take over the world, or we have lots of space, for double the population.
Yeah,
And some
I
of
mean,
them
this is what
can
it looks like
renovate
in
the
some
underground
parts of
space and
New
enjoy.
York. I feel like New York is gonna look like mostly like this in general, like all these underground spaces that people aren't familiar with. And yeah, like in New York, there was that thing recently where they found what was it? I wonder if I could find that too. New York Underground discovered investigation. Yeah, there was like underground. No, that's a synagogue. But yeah, this is another example too. But there was one that was like the tunnels in the train station, and someone had like secret rooms, underground rooms in the train station. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if you could, you would build underground and not have to pay taxes. And then they jacked electricity from the train station because they had people that had the power for the train station, so we had its own apartment essentially. It's pretty cool.
It's like OG Minecraft
Yeah,
base building.
exactly. Elon Musk.
Oh yeah, and here I just brought this up for fun, but just because we actually here have a technical crossover between America and Austria. So apparently some Portuguese or Spanish journalist was complaining that in Austria, as I had just mentioned, after the elections, the party with the most votes actually did not get the official concession or order by the president, which is not really in the constitution, but it's like a thing they do ever since they founded the Second Republic, I guess, in 1945, I guess, or the 1948, then I guess was the contract or something for Second Republic constitution. But anyhow,
42.
it was always usual that the strongest party gets this type of a, how do you call it? It's not a contract. It's like an order, or it's like a job, a task, right? But the
Mandate,
president,
right.
the mandate, yeah, mandate is a good word. The president, who's from the Green Party, we showed him previously, basically said, oh, because all the other parties already kind of said that they don't want to work with the Freedom Party, I'm not going to give the Freedom Party any mandate, but I'm just going to let you talk to each other for another week, which is just a charade anyhow, knowing that these contracts existed half a year ago, and you don't want to tell me that the former head of the Green Party, now president, didn't have an ear on all of that or some type of information on that. So the whole thing ended up that all kinds of journalists are mocking Austria now, also some kind of Spanish journalist, and
Really?
apparently this was taken up by Elon Musk, and he just commented and said like, oh, what a leftist dictatorship or something like this. Yes.
That's pretty funny. Well, that's what happens. I mean, you get conquered and forced to do things you don't want to do. Poor Austria. Rossi now claims 0-point energy can power an electric car. Really?
So what we will do is quite soon we will have Willy Mohorn on again, who has this very interesting device that without consuming any energy can, how do you call it? It can dry your walls. So it's kind of a small metal device. And through using quote unquote gravitational waves, even though that is probably not even the proper term, but whatever dynamics, you can hang this on the ceiling in a room. And then over certain weeks or months, it will naturally start drying the room. And that is, let's say, one real world application for quote unquote free energy, or at least energy that's not, doesn't have to be particularly extracted in a traditional sense, like with combustion engine, right? And we had him on the show before, and I'm sure he still has his device, but also he's keeping tabs on what's happening around the world. And he basically just called me quite excitedly and said, "Oh, look, there is new information coming from Rossi from Italy. There's also new
Yeah, Rossi
information
did some
coming
cool stuff in the
from
past.
someone in Nigeria, I believe." I immediately thought of Africast, and who
Let's
knows,
do it.
maybe can connect them as well. But at the very least, that we can bring up Willy Mohorn again together with Martin Hipp, and we can do a show on these new energy updates and see what's really happening. Because supposedly, from what Wilhelm told me, they're even now developing energy, like small type energy, super efficient energy plants. I'm not sure if that's really like the free energy, quote unquote, or what mechanism it is. I'm sure he will explain it. But it sounds like they're really going into like mass manufacturing of also household level energy generators, for lack of a more specific term. But yeah, anyone interested can already check out, at least aside from Rossi, which I put there. There's one article, and also there's Rossi's website itself, where I guess they have some information, and had this recent demonstration of a car where apparently there were two cars they let go, and using their technology, the car ran like a lot longer. Yeah, right. The car ran like double the distance, but also the battery, after running all the distance, was more charged than before, something like that. So
Right. And so
it
for
could be
people that are
useful.
kind of getting used to this idea, 0-point energy is the idea, the lowest possible energy that a quantum mechanical system may have. Unlike classical mechanics, quantum systems constantly fluctuate in their lowest energy state as described in the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Therefore, even at absolute zero, atoms and molecules retain some vibrational motion. Apart from atoms and molecules, the empty space of the vacuum also has these properties, and according to quantum field theory, the universe can be thought of as not isolated particles, but continuous fluctuating fields of matter fields whose quanta are fermions, and the force fields whose quanta are bosons, e.g., photons and gluons. All these fields have 0-point energy because they're, vibrating in 10-dimensional strings. So then we can just figure out how to float on that. And that's where we're at. We're basically at that point. Someone's probably done that before, and someone's about to do that again, but we're in the middle. We're in the tightrope of that moment.
Someone's probably done that before. So what I want to bring up, I guess, talking about Elon Musk. Anyone else noticed Musk replaced word humanity with civilization? Question mark technocrat. As I brought up before, Elon Musk's grandfather was the head for Technocracy Incorporated Canada chapter. And of course, we have technocracy movement, always good to bring up. And it's kind of relevant because the whole idea of technocracy and transhumanism has become popularized recently, but the background ideology for this idea has been around at the very least since the 1930s,
Right.
with a technical alliance, or 20s. And then literally you simply have, it's like Musk is just fulfilling his grandfather's mission or whatever, which I
Yeah, I
guess is
feel
quite
like
some family loyalty or whatever. But yeah.
well, I really want to read Werner von Braun's book because that's one of the things I still haven't done. But I know he wrote that science fiction story where Elon is in charge of Mars, right? So it'd be worth probably reading Werner von Braun's freaking book, I would think. Everybody, not just me.
Indeed.
All right, well, 0-point energy. We're about to be there. Rossi's cool. Gearboxes. What about ultimate energy of the future? Is this
And
part of this?
this is Willy Mohan's site. We
Yeah.
had him on, and he'll come on again.
Oh yeah.
And he can give us all the references. But here, I guess he's just collecting. This can be a good site for anyone to check out, just to see like updates, because he's reposting stuff from different areas of the world,
Right.
different information.
Yeah, my German and Austrian friends, please check out this website. Learn about these things. Connect with these strange, interesting Prussians. All right, well, Shelamov. Wait, no, wait, that was because of Putin. Thank you very much for the Shelamov connection to Putin, his mother's maiden name. And then I guess we have some Earth-shaped stuff. Might as well.
Oh yeah, right. We have one more section.
Yeah, somehow we wait to the end. So
yeah, the first thing is this I really want to understand, because look at even the first frame, maybe he shows his profile picture. Yeah, first frame of whatever this is. Yes. First frame. What do you see?
The microplastic glitter, the eye of Logan Paul, the singular eye of Logan
Exactly.
Paul. Okay.
So this is a guy that apparently collaborates with Logan Paul. I had never even really heard of these guys until the whole, Prime, Lunchley, whatever, disaster, moldy, whatever occurred. But this is not about that. What I'm curious about here, why is this guy, who apparently only a year ago, he has the videos on his channel, he was hanging out with Logan Paul. And here, if I understand this correctly, he's basically proselytizing about the firmament in association with the Bible. And he's basically telling people, look, if you're Christian or something, you can't not possibly believe in this. So yeah, so he's saying that this is a correct or better model or whatever. He's basing it, from what I understand, on the Bible. I don't think I listened to all of it, but just overall, I think it's kind of curious that this topic appears to be so close, even to some of these individuals that appear to have very high potential reach. You see what I'm saying? Like, not him necessarily, because it's only been in a video with the guy, but conversely, let's say it's unlikely.
Paul
and then
all about flat Earth for a minute there, right? He went to the Flat Earth Society and became a flat.
Oh, no, 12? No, much later.
It was a long time ago. Maybe it was.
No, because I think he did like some kind of a stunt after the Japanese, forest stunt. But it was him, right? But isn't that then even more interesting?
Was what, 2018 maybe?
2019? Right.
Is that the latest?
And I have to check that out. No, because I think there were other guys maybe before.
It must have
been. But I
2019.
almost forgot that because I never followed him.
I thought it was like 7 years earlier than this that it was coming up. But I think I'm mixing it up with the earlier. There was another flat Earth thing that happened in 2012 that people were getting obsessed with it. I think that was one of the earlier iterations. There's a Flat Earth Society thing, then there's a Flat Earth conference in 2012. Then there was the Logan Paul Renaissance. I really think Logan Paul popularized it on a level that people need to respect. Like, I know we get upset about it and we're like, oh, he's hokey and all that. I'm just saying, regardless, he introduced it to a mainstream audience of 12-year-olds that would have otherwise not heard it. And now I think I would almost say the majority of kids I interact with, which is more than probably most people because of being a YouTuber and knowing kids through Brittany and things like that, they don't believe that NASA's real. They don't believe the moon landing happened. They basically are flat earthers naturally. And, then there's the religious aspect, like you just said, which is interesting, that there's something tied to this Promethean religious futurism of the singularity back to the origin of reality being mechanistic. So it makes sense on a religious scale that everything they're talking about is lining up with this model as well, right? Having said that, space, aliens, demons, all that other stuff, I don't know what kids think about that now, because that was such an important part of our upbringing, like the Independence Day movie stuff.
Oh
And
yeah, for sure.
I think that they're probably more open to that than ever, because they're like, well, distance doesn't exist, so there's no outer space. It's just like, frequencies of space. But yeah, we'll have to see where that goes. Flat earthers
Density,
everywhere, bro.
waters above and waters below, right?
This guy, for the love of God. All right, what about?
So there is
Go back.
There is one last thing, just because it matches. Oh yeah, we still have a few more. I sent you one more in private chat.
Okay. Oh boy.
So here, oh yeah, and this one is just fun because it's Alex Jones.
It's always fun because it's Alex Jones. All he does is just make things more fun. Wow.
And because it's Neon Genesis Evangelion, and here we can even play this if you want for fun. In 1 minute, he's explaining the plot of Neon Genesis Evangelion at the Joe Rogan podcast.
Wait. I'll have to go back for a second. Hold on.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. I know with the audio it's a mess.
Because they're thinking there's this big war trying to basically destroy humanity, because humanity has free will and there's a decision to which level we want to go to. We have free will, so evil's allowed to come and contend, not just good. And the elites themselves believe they're racing using human technology to try to take our best minds and build some type of breakaway civilization.
Oh man, all this is true, but like the music from Evangelion is gonna get me in trouble. But yeah, that civilization already exists, my friends. That's what we've been trying to tell you. All right. Well.
So yeah, next thing, but we don't need the audio.
Yeah.
I just want to point it out. Yeah. So here we have, of course, the great conspiracy music guru, who is. I'm very thankful that he's allowing people to actually play his music and not copyright strike it or anything like that, which some other people like to do. Now you've switched forward to something that I don't think I had put up.
Oh, weird. It must have just because it was like right after the song. It jumped ahead. There we go.
So basically here, because now there will be this so-called final experiment in December, and people will go to Antarctica and most likely observe a 24-hour sun, which supposedly on certain, how do you call it, AE maps, so flat, or how do you call it, equidistant, azimuthal equidistant? Yeah, something along those lines, would supposedly not be possible. But here, that's why I can recommend everyone to check this out who's interested in these talks. Check out what Nachiketa spoke about with Z, because Z basically pulled up a document from about 120 years ago from I guess a so-called zetetic book, or related to zetetic cosmology, for lack of a better term. And they show that already in that book so many years ago, or that script, or that article, they already conceded and said, yes, under circumstances, there very well can be a 24-hour sun. I cannot explain you the physics or the details of it, but it's just very curious that there actually is a document that's saying, yes, you can have a model of a, let's say, non-globe Earth, and also at the same time you can have a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, which is what the big fuss is now about today. And I just think it's amazing that someone like Z actually looks at the documents and can pull out something from 120 years ago, whereas if you would consider that, this whole experiment thing they're doing would be a moot point, more or less. because you wouldn't say, oh, this one completely disproves a model, when those developing at least a significant portion or variant of that model, let's say a non-globe model, already 120 years ago, explained the situation in the case where this observation would very much be allowed for within their model and not be a definite exclusion for the possibility of their model. So I hope this was understandable what I just said. If not, please just check out the video. It's very well explained.
Nachiketa doing amazing things. Eddie Bravo here, who we love.
Oh yeah, here I guess just fun video from John Thor. No, this is not Eddie Bravo.
Yeah, look at him.
What? Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean.
And it's also fun because here actually in this interview he says like, oh, I don't even want to wake up anyone anymore. I'm just chilling out over here. It's kind of fun.
Dude. Under the Dome, Book 2, Who Am I, by Yorki Shepentulevsky.
I have no clue about this book. Again, a random comment I read somewhere, and I was like, this seems interesting enough to at least put a link in it for anyone who wants to check it out.
All right. I'll look into this too. And then Wilbur.
Especially because it says, who am I and how did I get here? You know, because I think
right.
that's a question we all have. Oh, yeah, and here, this is apparently it's one of these early guys, and he's interesting because he apparently made, at least today, they'd call it a cult.
No one except a low-down scoundrel, a person lower than the dirtiest dog, yet lower down than a skunk, would call the earth a globe in Zion City. Nice. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, so he then kind of crashed and burned, but one of the, now it may seem like an early example, although we also know from Flat Earth Dave, who made this interview with the 90-year-old lady, and when he asked her, what did you learn in school in one of the US states in the maybe 1920s or 30s, she says she was taught a flat earth model, actually. So even here, it's a question whether this back then really was considered a cult in the way it's portrayed now, or what the real story is. Because to me right now, it would not be exactly clear what percentage of individuals in America in 1930, or when was this supposed to have happened, really believed in the globe or in a flat earth model or any other model.
Right. Well, I mean, interesting also because Zion, Illinois, there's some apostolic Catholics, which means they're not associated with the Vatican, but they consider themselves Catholics. You do what you want with that in a place not too far from where the Mormons built Nauvoo. I mean, you know, further than some places, but much closer than others. Like, this is commerce, not too far away, and after the Mormon Wars, so that's cool. All right, Candace Owens, director Mark Herman is Antarctica bound. Really, she's in now. Okay, they're all putting some money in. Crazy.
Yes, right.
What the heck? What a weird group of people to get to go. I'm kind of like, I don't know. Now I'm wondering, like, shouldn't I have wanted to go? Am I crazy here? All right, what about this? Did you guys see Tim Waltz call Elon Musk gay?
That's how bad it was. So now, I suppose it wasn't too bad, thinking back to that economy. If you're a billionaire, Elon Musk, for example, say, that guy got it. Michigan knows that word. Look, that.
I mean, that's so weird. He just kind of calls him a gay guy. I feel like if anybody else, it's whatever. But like, you know what I mean?
Context and slang. I think he referred to something else.
No, he just accidentally, he meant to say guy, he said gay, and then like he played it off by using a hate crime as a joke. And if someone else, I'm just, as you know, I'm back in my CNN mindset. If someone else had done that, they'd be in extreme trouble and canceled, right? Or maybe not canceled because he's so well placed.
Who is this guy who spoke?
The vice presidential nominee for Kamala Harris. That's Kamala Harris's vice presidential nominee. He just called Elon Musk a gay guy.
I understand. Now I understand why he's saying hate crime. I was like, what are you talking about? Okay.
If it was flipped around, if Elon Musk had called Tim Waltz a gay guy, that would have caused, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it would have been extremely bad for him. So the fact that this is, it's completely going to be whatever. I'm very curious if he even has to apologize. He probably doesn't. And I don't care. I'm sure Elon Musk doesn't care. But that's kind of the point, I think, that this is where we're at, where people have to worry. And every week, I mean, this is the one line I wish people cared more about, where Tony had said this during the Madison Square Garden event. Everyone's worried about the Puerto Rican garbage patch joke. But what he said that was really interesting was that every week he gets a new list of words and things he's not allowed to say, and that's to me a bigger deal. Like, that reminds me more of the Soviet Union, of Yugoslavia, of my life in America than anything else. Is that I'm getting a list of things I'm not allowed to say, as opposed to new rights, new privileges, new
Yes,
capacity for privilege
yes,
every
yes.
day should be
So
expanded.
I 100% agree with you, and that's also what I mentioned earlier, looking at the politicians and the surface level view, let's say, that I can glean. The question I have is I'm kind of suspecting a trap here in terms of the overall dialectic. We spoke before about the pendulum swinging whatever directions up and down. But the real point here being that maybe when those, let me say, saviors come along of whatever party, politician, whatever else they actually take manifestation in, they finally remove all that obvious speech control and whatever else and wokeism and crazy education board things and so on that anyhow I assume most Americans, most people don't agree with, also because it's been forced on them so heavily for the past decades. But then how much additional faith will people put in these apparent saviors, and what kind of other back deals and other overall New World Order goals, let's say, will be able to be accomplished because everyone will be cheering on and being like, finally, you remove this yoke of this, crypto communist speech control. But maybe that was part of the plan all along because they would know people would get fed up with this after many decades.
Now I can pay
And
my taxes and be a slave, as I always wanted. I think that's the thing. People will just use, like, thank God now I get to submit. That's what it worries me.
exactly. Or then
Jesus is
it's
the
like
only
just,
answer. I
oh boy.
just want to say this because I was at the airport and I had to do my pat down. I always do, like, I'm a male opt out. Can you let him know I'm a male opt out? So this guy comes and he does this whole pat down. He searches me and finds me to be okay to pass. And this wouldn't be that big of a deal, except his name was Jesus. It was Jesus. And so I say thank you. And as I'm looking for his name, I see, like, thank you, Jesus. And I realize I'm, like, saying thank you, Jesus. And that Jesus has just checked me out. And, in Revelation, it talks about how you won't notice him. You'll be like, oh, yeah, it's like, so what if this really was Jesus? And Jesus just checked me out and I was, pure enough to fly, right? I don't know. So I felt good.
And then here, just briefly going through the comments. Anders, that's also a cool new name for
Good
you.
name, yeah.
But it's like Andrea was the best. Did you see the research spent 20K measuring equipment to prove it was flat and found more evidence not being flat? If you're referring to the Behind the Curve experiment, or sorry, Behind the Curve Netflix special documentary, if you really want to know the backstory, at the very least, check out Globebusters and maybe some other channels. Quite a few times they talk about this and how apparently they were tricked, and also most specifically how this one line that you get on the movie Netflix special where they say, oh boy, there is some problem here. There's quite some context to this, even things that were said immediately before and after that, which conveniently were cut out from the documentary just to make it an extreme hit piece. And the findings they did, from what I understand, 15 degrees of, I don't know the proper word. It's a relevant data point at the very least. But this is the thing, and that's also why I kept harping on the final experiment for the whole year, is because it looks like, maybe it's different, but it really looks like whatever they're going to do in Antarctica now will be the stage setup for another heavy hit piece, which will not encourage further discussion and just laying out all of the facts. Everyone can decide for themselves what model they want to adopt or believe in, if they want to believe or think is more credible, but rather just to create a completely one-sided hit piece, just like Behind the Curve was. And up to today, when I talk to anyone about this, this is something that comes up because people have kind of seen the Netflix special about this, but that's then usually already the entire extent of the information they have, which I would consider is not sufficient to properly form an opinion on that quite extensive topic. That was my speech for today. Thank you very much, Andreas.
That wasn't bad at all. Also, yeah, if you haven't seen the show Undressed on MTV from 1998, 2000, what a crazy show made in, like, Nova Scotia, Canada, that's pretending to be about the United States. And it's such a weird time to be alive because, right, it's like the internet exists, but it's still 80s American people, you know, like people that they haven't quite adapted to the New World Order yet, and they're gonna fall by the wayside. These are the millennial Gen Xers, right? Undressed on MTV. Beautiful show. This was a Neuropa episode with Raph. Thank you, Raph, for being here. I want to make sure we can find your links.
Thanks everyone for joining. If you're interested, check out the links, make up your own mind, share your research with us.
Mency.at, Fluorescent Metrokosmos. I'll see you soon. Be safe out there.